You know, we like to think of our bodies as these perfectly engineered machines. But what if I told you there's a tiny hidden spot in your upper thigh that's actually a pretty fascinating and potentially dangerous design flaw? Well, today we are going deep into the femoral canal, a little space that can cause some really big problems.
So to really get this, we got to start with the big picture. I mean, our arms and legs, they share a basic blueprint, right? But evolution had very different plans for them. Our arms became all about mobility and grabbing things, fine motor skills. But our legs? Nope. Their job was stability. They had to become these incredibly strong pillars to hold up our entire body. And that one simple difference? That's the key to unlocking the hidden flaw we're about to find. All right, to find this flaw, we need a map. Our journey begins at the top front part of the thigh, in a super important anatomical junction called the femoral triangle.
Now, the first thing to get your head around is that the femoral triangle isn't a thing you can, pick up. It's a space. It's a gap that's created by the muscles all around it. Just picture a little triangular valley right at the top of your leg. And it's a huge deal for surgeons because all the important stuff for the leg passes right through here.
So let's actually build this triangle in our mind. It'll make it way easier to understand. The top of it, the base of the triangle, is formed by something called the inguinal ligament. Basically, that's the crease between your torso and your leg. That's our top border.
Okay, next up, the walls. Now, don't get hung up on the fancy muscle names. Just imagine two long muscles that form the sides of our valley. One makes up the outer wall, the other makes up the inner wall. And as they run down your thigh, they meet at a point, creating the other two sides of our triangle. Simple as that.
And finally, the floor. It's not flat. It's more of a muscular ditch, or trough, that's made up of 4 different muscles. So there you have it. We've built our container. A 3D, triangular space with a ligament on top and muscles on the other sides.
So, we've built the box. But the reason this area is so critical is because of what's inside. This is where we find the main plumbing and wiring for the entire leg. So passing right through this triangle are the big blood vessels. And they're not just rattling around in there, they're neatly packaged inside what's called the femoral sheath. You can think of it like a funnel-shaped sleeve of connective tissue that comes down from the abdomen, kind of like a protective cable wrap. And here, this is where things get really interesting. Inside this protective sleeve, there are 3 separate little compartments. In the outer one, you've got the femoral artery, pumping fresh blood down. In the middle, the femoral vein, bringing blood back up. But then you look at that third compartment, the one on the inside, the femoral canal, and it looks kind of empty, which is weird.
I mean, that begs a pretty obvious question, right? Why would your body go to all the trouble of designing this perfect protective highway for blood flow and then leave a seemingly empty, open lane right next to it? What is the point of this gap?
Well, the answer is that this space isn't a mistake. It has a name, the femoral canal, and its whole purpose is also the source of some pretty significant danger. This is the design flaw we've been hunting for.
So what's actually in there? It's not totally empty. It's a teeny tiny cone-shaped space, only about 1.5 centimeters long. Inside you'll find some fatty tissue, some lymphatic vessels, and a lymph node. But here's the key. There are no major, tough structures in there like an artery or a nerve. It's mostly just soft, compressible stuff.
The real kicker is the opening at the very top of this canal. It's called the femoral ring, and it's only about 1.5 centimeters wide. Think about that. That's a tiny open doorway leading directly from the high-pressure abdomen down into the soft tissues of your thigh. It's literally a built-in weak spot. So why does it even exist? Well, it's a classic evolutionary trade-off. This little bit of empty space gives the big femoral vein right next to it room to expand when you've got a lot of blood returning from the leg. That's the feature. But the bug, the dangerous side effect, is that it creates a weak point in the wall between your abdomen and your leg.
And all of this anatomy, this whole story, brings us to the clinical payoff. That weak spot is the exact place where something called a femoral hernia can happen. So, a femoral hernia is pretty much what it sounds like. It's what happens when stuff from inside your abdomen, like a loop of your intestine, gets forced through that weak little femoral ring and bulges down into the femoral canal. The pressure inside your belly just pushes things through the path of least resistance.
And the path it takes is really specific and a little strange. The bulge enters through the ring at the top, travels down that short 1.5 centimeter canal, and then it pops out of another opening in the thigh. And from there, it often takes a weird turn and travels upwards, showing up as a lump in the groin.
What's really interesting is that this kind of hernia is way more common in women.
And the anatomy we just went through explains exactly why. Women have a wider pelvis, which kind of stretches the whole area out, and they also tend to have smaller femoral vessels. So you have a wider space and smaller things filling it up. The result? The femoral ring, that little doorway, is just naturally larger in women, which makes them more likely to have this problem.
Now, what makes a femoral hernia so incredibly dangerous is that opening. The femoral ring is surrounded by tough ligament and solid bone. It's totally rigid. It doesn't give. So if a piece of bowel gets stuck in there, the ring can literally squeeze it shut and cut off its blood supply. That's called strangulation, and it is a life-threatening, full-blown surgical emergency.
And this leads to one last really fascinating surgical problem. So, to free a trapped hernia, a surgeon might need to carefully cut a specific ligament to make that rigid ring a little bigger. But as Dr. Mbaka points out, in some people, there's a major artery that just happens to run right where that cut needs to be made. It's just a perfect storm, a tiny variation in anatomy that can create a huge risk during an already urgent operation.
So in the end, the femoral canal is so much more than just a little anatomical detail. It's a tiny 1.5 centimeter space that tells a massive story, a story about compromise, about the evolutionary trade-offs our bodies have made. It's there for a reason, but that reason also creates a hidden weakness. Which makes you wonder, right? What other hidden flaws and trade-offs are built into us? Just reminding us that evolution isn't a perfect designer, but a master of just finding solutions that are good enough.